Well, as businesses are getting ready to use their new tax savings to grow more, hire more, pay more, California lawmakers are pushing legislations to tax more, to force companies to hand over half of their expected savings back to the state of California. Here now is Paul Preston. He is the founder of New California, which is pushing to divide the state of California. Now, Paul, first of all, let me ask about this new tax measure, if it passes. Lord knows if it will. But 50% of Californians' tax revenue already comes from the top 1%. If they enforce this tax, that could add up to about 60 to 70% of taxes coming from the business side of the equation. If they move out of California, what happens to California?
Well, we basically go bankrupt, continue on the path of financial tyranny that we're on right now. We'll lose millions of jobs, which is apparently what this government of California wants to see happen. We've been losing jobs and bleeding jobs for the last 18 to 15 to 20 years. And now we're sort of at the bottom of the barrel, so to speak. We have so much poverty out there, it's not even funny. Homeless people all over the place. It's going to be devastating to business, but it also shows you how desperate Jerry Brown and the rest of the mono party here in California, who's been wreaking this, ravaging this tyranny upon us Californians, they're desperate right now. They're very desperate for cash.
But the point is, we've seen in other states like Illinois and New Jersey and New York, they are losing a lot of people who are going to California, going to Florida and Texas, right, and other places where there aren't any income taxes, or at least low income taxes. Is the same happening in California? And again, if the businesses start voting with their feet and bring jobs with them out of the state of California, what are you folks going to do?
Well, that's just it, and that's why we've created New California State Movement to stop this, because it's not going to stop. They're proving every single day that they are not going to stop with the tyranny that they're foisting upon citizens of California.
There's another issue that has come to the forefront, and of course the nation as a whole is arguing right now the subject of immigration, what to do with DACA, et cetera. You guys in California have kind of a unique situation. Some people say that there's a new bill going through that would allow illegal aliens to vote because of the fact that they have a driver's license, and as a part of getting their driver's license, they may be able to register to vote. Now, the California government is saying no, that illegal aliens would be allowed to have a driver's license, but not one on which they'd be able to register. What say you about all this?
That's not going to happen. They're going to go ahead and they're going to register. They're going to get their driver's license, and they'll be registered voters. And I doubt very seriously if there's going to be any checkup, any follow-up to see whether or not they're illegal aliens or not. How are they going to do that? That's a whole new government system that they have to put in place. So that just is not going to happen, because they don't have the money to do any type of setting up of a bureaucracy like that. It's just one more lie that we've been told by Jerry Brown and the mono party here in California.
Now, as you know, states are allowed to sort of organize voting as they see fit, but not to the extent where they could allow illegal non-citizens to vote. That's when the federal government would come in and say, nothing doing. Do you see some kind of conflict between the federal government and the California state government if it's found that some illegal aliens are able to vote because of this new rule?
Well, there's already conflict right now. Javier Becerra declared war, basically, on all the employers out there that are employing illegal aliens that want to cooperate with ICE. He has said that he's going to institute state law, the sanctuary state law, to punish these people that want to comply with federal law. That's the breakdown of law and order in the entire nation. And he has declared war, basically, on the United States of America. He is a secessionist, and we are not. We are trying to make a new state from old California.
Paul Preston, good to see you, sir. Thank you for coming in. Appreciate it.